Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles. Today's video features an incredible story, so let's dive right in. I gave her a home, my heart, and my unwavering loyalty as we exchanged vows on our wedding day. Our love was strong, and I was willing to weather any storm with her. However, there was a constant thorn in our side: her unpredictable and meddlesome parents. Despite their interference, I accepted it as part of the package when I married Kelly. But what I couldn't accept was the heart-wrenching discovery that she was chasing after something more with someone else. And to make matters worse, it wasn't just anyone, it was a trusted family friend. The feeling of betrayal was like a dagger in my chest. I couldn't help but wonder if they thought I was an easy mark, a simp they could deceive without consequences. Little did they know that beneath my calm exterior, a burning desire for revenge was slowly taking root. Before I dive into the details of my revenge plan, there's an unusual element to this story. Someone had advised me to boil 6 eggs and sneak them into the housewarming party at the like button's house. At the time, it seemed like an eccentric request, but I followed it, not fully comprehending its significance. Now, let's return to the main narrative. The betrayal, the anger, and the thirst for revenge were all consuming. What happened next in my life was something I could never have anticipated, and it forever altered the course of my relationship with Kelly. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and I'm here to share my twisted experience with my cheating wife, Kelly, who's 1 year younger than me. She recently cheated on me with a friend of mine, also 27 years old. Let's call him Jay for the sake of this story. Our story begins when I was 22. I attended a friend's wedding and, by chance, ended up seated next to Kelly. We were both close to the couple getting married. She was tight with the bride, and I was chummy with the groom. Little did we know that our friends had hatched a plan to play matchmakers by seating us together at the wedding. When I first laid eyes on Kelly, I was utterly gobsmacked by her beauty. As we began to chat, it became apparent that we had a lot in common, and our conversation flowed effortlessly. We clicked instantly and spent the evening chatting, enjoying the wedding meal, and even swaying to the music on the dance floor. It was a night filled with dancing, drinking, and, yes, a little smooching right there in the middle of the dance floor. Our friends, the newlyweds, were ecstatic to see their matchmaking plan unfolding. They playfully asked us about our relationship status, but we just shrugged it off and continued with our night. When we parted ways that evening, we didn't exchange numbers. However, about a week later, I received a text from Kelly asking me out. Our bride friend had shared my number with her without hesitation. I agreed, and that's how our relationship began to blossom. Fast forward a couple of years, and our relationship was thriving. Sure, we had our occasional tiffs, like any couple, but nothing too serious ever emerged. Eventually, I decided to pop the question, and less than a year later, we were married. We enjoyed a little more than a year of wedded bliss, or so I thought. Little did I know that a storm was brewing on the horizon, threatening to shatter the happiness we had built together. Just before our first anniversary, I noticed a shift in Kelly's behavior. She became more protective of her phone, her girls' nights out seemed to multiply like rabbits, and our intimate life dwindled to nearly non-existent. I brought up these concerns multiple times, only to be dismissed and accused of letting my insecurities get the best of me. Kelly appeared unaffected by my feelings and concerns, so in response, I grew colder. The tender goodbye kisses as I left for work vanished, and our conversations dwindled to only the necessary exchanges. Then came the night when it all became too much for me to bear. I decided to see for myself what was going on. While Kelly slept, I scoured her phone and laptop, rummaging through her texts, emails, and messenger apps, only to find nothing suspicious. However, having read countless stories of similar situations, I knew I had one more place to check: her car. I sneaked into her car, and to my surprise, I found a second phone hidden there. In that instant, I knew what was happening, but I wanted to gather all the evidence before confronting her. I didn't want her to brush it off as a one-time mistake or some other excuse. I sifted through the phone, finding only one suspicious number. I read every message, connected the phone to my computer, and printed out every conversation and photo. That night, I found myself researching divorce lawyers in my home office. I spent hours reading lawyer profiles until I found one I liked and sent him an email. Since it was a Saturday, I didn't expect an immediate response. My curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to find out who the other guy was. I picked up my phone and dialed the number I had found, intending to pretend to be someone else. But when Jay's contact popped up, I felt my world come crashing down. I couldn't contain my anger, and I exploded, yelling and cursing in my office. When my wife opened the door to check on me, I angrily yelled at her to get out. I had never raised my voice or cursed at her before that day. I stayed holed up in my office, silently fuming and glaring at the wall. Desperate for a drink, I called up a friend from the wedding, let's call him Tony, and asked if he would join me. He agreed, probably because he could hear something was terribly wrong in my voice. Without any explanation, I grabbed all the printouts and headed to the bar. I got there first and ordered 4 shots of Jack and a beer. When Tony arrived, he found me downing my last shot. When he asked what was going on, I blurted out, "Kelly's cheating." Tony was the one who had introduced me to Jay, and all he could say was, "I'm sorry," over and over again. Although Jay and I were never close, we were friendly whenever we ran into each other at social events. I made Tony promise not to tell anyone about this. I hadn't even spoken to Kelly or a lawyer yet. If his wife asked about me, he was to say I was having problems at work. He agreed, and we drank and talked for most of the night. At around 3 a.m., I called an Uber and went home. When I got there, I saw Kelly sleeping on the couch. Without saying a word, I went up to our bedroom and fell asleep. When I woke up, she was lying next to me, but I wasn't ready to confront her. I got dressed and left the house, heading to my office to bury myself in work all day. When I got back home around 10 p.m., my wife was there to greet me. She had made me dinner and asked if I wanted her to heat it up. I simply said no and went to bed. She followed me, asking what had been bothering me. I told her to leave me alone and that I wanted to sleep. The tension in our once happy home had reached a breaking point, and I knew that I couldn't keep ignoring the truth any longer. She wouldn't let me sleep and kept asking and trying to get my attention. Eventually, I lost my temper and yelled at her to stop and let me sleep. The next morning, I received an email from the lawyer asking to meet later in the day. I confirmed the meeting and got ready to leave. When I walked downstairs, I saw that Kelly had made breakfast and wanted to talk. I made a small plate and sat down. She began by saying that I'd been acting differently and going on about how I had changed. She wanted to know why. I told her that work had been stressful and assured her it would be over soon. After finishing my meal, I told her I had to leave for work. I was counting down the minutes until I could meet with the lawyer. The meeting with the lawyer went well, and I handed over all the evidence I had gathered. The lawyer told me, "I'm sorry for all that's going on, but I'm happy you gathered all this information. You see, we live in an at-fault state, so your wife has no claim on most of your money." I was taken aback. I hadn't even thought about that. I just wanted to get a divorce as soon as possible. I asked the lawyer to make copies of the evidence, and he agreed. When I got home, I was ready to confront Kelly, but she wasn't there. I called her once, twice, but there was no answer, so I texted her, "I don't care if you're with Jay right now. Get home, we need to talk." Sure enough, she called back in less than a minute, asking what I was talking about. All I told her was to get home now. She showed up 15 minutes later. "Interesting," I said. 15 minutes is just about how long it takes to drive from here to Jay's. What a coincidence. She stared at me, looking confused. I gave her a minute to assemble her thoughts, but she was clearly too busy practicing her goldfish impression to reply. Lost for words, I asked her what was going on. She tried to deny everything and started gaslighting me. As she began to insult me personally, I slammed my fist on the table to put an end to it. Check out this mountain I built up, I said, pulling out my stack of evidence. I showed her each printout one at a time. She told me to stop and began to cry. She even tried to apologize and said she loved me. Funny, I said. You were so adamant about degrading and insulting me just a minute ago. Where's that fiery spirit now? She tried to hug me, blubbering about how sorry she was. I held up my hand, signaling her to keep her distance. She kept pushing herself towards me, insisting she could make it right and that she would do anything for me. She even suggested we take this to the bedroom. I'm never going to touch you again, I told her coldly. Also, do you know who else has these documents? My lawyer. I'm divorcing you now. Grab a bag, pack up your things, and get the frick out of my house. That was 3 days ago, and since then, there's been radio silence from her. Our once happy life had crumbled, and I was left to pick up the pieces and move forward with my decision to end our marriage. I decided to book an appointment with the doctor for an STD check that's now lined up for 2 days from now. Next, I reached out to my support network, including my father and a few close friends. They've all been very supportive, offering their own advice and even help. However, I felt like I had this disaster on a fairly tight leash, so I politely declined their assistance. Then came the time to face her family. I sent a text to her mom and dad, expressing my gratitude for welcoming me into their family and for all they had done for me. But with a heavy heart, not really, they were kind of suffocating, and although they're nice people, I was relieved I no longer had to deal with them. I informed them that Kelly and I were getting divorced and told them they could ask me any questions if they wanted to. Next, I had to break the news to Kelly's sister, with whom I had been good friends, and I knew this news would destroy that friendship. I texted her, "Hey, I'm sorry to have to text you this, but Kelly and I are getting divorced. I wanted you to know from day one, you accepted me as a brother, and I'll still be here if you ever need anything from me." Shortly after, her parents got back to me, and the conversation went like this. Parents, we're so sorry to hear this. What happened? Why hasn't Kelly said anything to us? Me, Kelly's been in an affair for at least a year. I thought she might have reached out to you, but we haven't heard from her. We'll call her. Are you sure about the affair? Parents, I'm positive. I found their texts. Parents, we're so sorry. We'll try to get in touch with her. After dealing with her family, it was time to take on the big task of facing Jay's fiancée. I had a sinking feeling that Kelly and Jay might have created some ingenious plan to keep hiding their secret. Either Kelly hadn't spilled the beans about me knowing, or they're just idiots. I texted her around 2 p.m., asking if we could meet for coffee. We met at some trendy coffee shop, and as I sipped on my awful coffee, I said to her, "There's no easy way to say this, so I'll just say it. Jay has been cheating on you with my wife for over a year." She was obviously taken aback, so I added, "I only found out a few days ago. I should have told you then, but I had a divorce to kickstart and my own pity party to attend." She asked how I found out, so I told her everything that's in the first post. I asked if she wanted to see the evidence I'd gathered and pulled out a binder. She grabbed the binder and skimmed through the messages and pictures, just starting to silently cry. I told her she was more than welcome to take the binder. I even had extra copies just in case she wanted to confront Jay or test his lying skills. She thanked me, stood up, took the binder, and left. As she walked away, she looked utterly defeated. Before she left, I made sure to let her know that if she needed anything from me, all she had to do was ask. Now, I know many of you advised me to stay sober and keep a clear head, but honestly, my world has just crashed down on top of me. So, I've decided to take this week to marinate in self-pity on my back porch, grab some drinks, cigars, and some loud music. But don't worry, this pity party will stop once the week is over. I plan to stop feeling sorry for myself and get back to my usual schedule. On a lighter note, I've already packed up most of her things, including clothes, jewelry, and so on. I also did her a favor and included our wedding book in every photo with her in it in the boxes. I've been told I'm a generous guy. If and when she decides to come back for her stuff, I don't plan on playing the gracious host for longer than necessary. And before your imagination runs wild, let me assure you that I didn't ruin her clothes or anything. Okay, I may have broken a few picture frames, but I mean, who's counting? As of right now, everything's rather quiet. I've done my duty in spreading the grim news of the cheating to everyone who needed to know. My doctor's appointment is booked, my lawyer is working to get me out of this mess, and 90% of her things are neatly packed in boxes. If she continues to keep her distance, this might turn out to be the smoothest divorce in history. I kept indulging in my personal pity party, drowning my sorrows in alcohol. I'd say this is my first semi-sober moment since the revelation hit me. The whole train of emotions has been hard to articulate, but numb is probably the best descriptor. As I mentioned earlier, I had notified everyone about the situation, and the only one who didn't respond was Kelly's sister, Wendy, whom I've always been very close to. That very night, after a few more drinks, I passed out on my back patio, a motley collection of bottles and beer cans keeping me company. I woke up to the smell of breakfast being cooked. My first thought was, oh Christ, Kelly is back and thinks a breakfast bribe is her ticket to redemption. Bracing myself for a screaming match, I was shocked to see that it was Wendy. Wendy saw I was awake, sprinted to me, and wrapped her arms around me. She then led me to the table and served up a plate. As I ate, she shared her side of the story. Apparently, Kelly had shown up at her house, downplaying our problems as a temporary bump. When I texted Wendy about the divorce, she confronted Kelly, who broke down and confessed everything. I corrected her, saying, "There's no way she told you everything." I then recounted the sordid details. Wendy revealed that Kelly had tried to play it off as a one-time mistake. I made it clear to Wendy that reconciliation with Kelly wasn't an option and that Kelly should find herself a lawyer. To my surprise, Wendy was there for me. She confirmed that while she cared for her sister, she was my friend too and wouldn't abandon me. This warmed my heart. Wendy stayed with me for 2 days in the guest bedroom, you heathens, and left this morning. As she was leaving, I was packing for a trip to my cabin, which I owned before the marriage, so it's off limits to Kelly. I was gathering my hunting and fishing gear when Wendy asked to join. As much as I appreciated the company, I suggested she should probably check on her sister. She agreed, gave me a hug, and left. To clarify any misconceptions, I want to make it clear that there's no love story between Wendy and me. She's only 20, far too young for me. We share a great friendship, and nothing more. In other news, I did get tested at the doctor's, and the results should be in by Monday. I've also been checking in on Jay's fiancée, offering to lend an ear if she needs to vent. Wendy coming to my house and staying for a few days was a welcome distraction. She left when I was heading to my cabin for some hunting. The good news is I bagged a nice, fat 8-pointer buck on my first day out there. This was a great stroke of luck as it left the rest of my time for fishing. I caught 2 decent-sized ones, which turned into a meal, and the next one to be butchered. I spent the rest of my stay at the cabin processing my deer and enjoying the natural views. Apart from a drink or 2 a day, I spent my trip sober, as promised. My drinking spree was confined to the previous week. Now, on to the events of the past few days. I got a call from my doctor, and thankfully, all is clear. Not too surprising, given the lack of passionate nights with Kelly in the past few months, but you can never be too sure. I reached out to Jay's fiancée but didn't hear back for some time. She eventually responded, saying she was staying with her family. Reading between the lines, it seems it's not going too well for her either. I told her if there's anything I could do, she just had to reach out. She asked to meet for coffee, which I readily agreed to. We met at the same quirky hipster coffee shop the next day and talked for about 2 hours. We discussed everything about Kelly and me. She was curious about the steps I was taking and whether there was any chance of reconciliation. I made it clear that cheating was a deal-breaker for me, given the selfishness and disrespect it takes to cheat, let alone for a year. It was evident Kelly didn't really care for me. When asked about her plan, she said she was confused, as everything she thought was true turned out to be lies. She wasn't sure about her next step, whether to move on or forgive him. I candidly told her that if she can forgive someone for cheating on her for that long, she's a better person than me. She shared that her family was suggesting that she forgive Jay and proceed with their marriage. I told her that just because it's what her family wants doesn't mean she needs to follow along. Jay obviously doesn't respect marriage. He cheated on her, his fiancée, with my wife. That's a clear sign he's not marriage material. I urged her to do what she thought was right and to make her own decisions. I recounted when I found out. I tried to find a way my heart could trick my brain into thinking I could accept it and forgive her, but I just couldn't do it. I encouraged her to follow her gut feeling. As per my experience, the brain and heart can sometimes lead you astray, but gut instincts are usually on the mark. She thanked me, and we parted ways. The following day, my lawyer informed me that Kelly had been served at her workplace. Wendy called me soon after, saying Kelly hadn't left her room all day and was sobbing in bed. I explained she'd been served and was probably grappling with the consequences of her actions. Wendy asked about my cabin trip, and I filled her in. After a brief chat, we hung up, and I began preparing myself for the possible storm that Kelly might unleash now that she's been served. I was waiting for Kelly to show up at the house, given everything that's happened, but I wasn't sure what to expect from her. I checked all the security cameras around the house to ensure they were working properly, both inside and outside. I also called my friend, alerting him that Kelly was served today, and if she shows up, he needs to come over as soon as possible. I was not going to jail because of this woman. As it turns out, my caution was justified. Kelly showed up at the house, banging on the door and screaming to be let in. I immediately called my friend and Wendy to come over. She was cursing and begging me to let her in, and all I could do was wonder why she didn't just use her keys to enter. When my friend arrived, he stayed in his truck and started recording the ongoing drama on his phone. His wife, a friend of Kelly's, got out of the truck and tried to calm Kelly down. Instead, Kelly slapped her and screamed at her to mind her own business. This made my friend call the authorities. When they arrived, Kelly tried to play the victim. She cried and told the officers that I hit her and threw her out of the house. My friend and his wife relayed what they saw when they arrived, but since they didn't see the initial event, they couldn't confirm or deny Kelly's accusations. One of the officers approached my door, and as soon as I opened it, Kelly pointed at me, claiming I hit her and demanded my arrest. I was being put in handcuffs when I insisted that I could prove her lies. The officer allowed me to show him the footage from the outdoor cameras. Upon reviewing the video, the officer apologized for jumping to conclusions and assuming I was at fault. I told him I didn't blame him. Apparently, during Kelly's rant, she screamed out, "He hit me," leading my neighbors to call the authorities too, causing the officers to form their judgment even before arriving. After dealing with the authorities for about half an hour, Kelly was eventually handcuffed and charged with disturbing the peace, public intoxication, and a DUI. As the police were escorting Kelly to their car, Wendy showed up. She asked me what had happened, so I showed her the video of the whole ordeal on my phone. An officer approached me, handing me the case number and some other paperwork. Wendy started asking questions about the charges, so I just went back inside. Wendy followed me in shortly after and sat down next to me. She explained that she had only left her house for 10 minutes to run to the store. When she returned, Kelly was no longer in the living room. She assumed Kelly had gone to bed after having too much wine. Wendy and I talked for a while, and she asked if she could stay the night. I told her she was welcome anytime. Wendy informed me that Kelly had to spend the night in jail, and I'm not sure why, but she could be bailed out in the morning. After I had gone back inside, Wendy called her parents to let them know what was happening and to see if they could bail Kelly out since Wendy didn't have the necessary funds. We shared a beer and soon went to bed. When I woke up the next morning, Wendy had already left to meet with her parents. I haven't heard from Kelly, Wendy, or their parents since then, but I can only imagine that it's not a pleasant conversation they're having. I haven't heard from Kelly since that incident, but her lawyer contacted mine indicating that he will be representing her. Finally, we can proceed with the legal process. Additionally, I reached out to Jay's fiancée to check if there were any updates from her side. We exchanged a few text messages, and she informed me that she had kicked Jay out of her house. Her father and brother packed up all his belongings and took them to his place. She confided that while her father and brother were tempted to confront Jay physically, she requested them not to. She wants to leave this mess behind her and move forward. She appreciated me checking up on her and assured me that her close friends were there to support her. I shared my Reddit page link with her so that she could see all the support that you all have been giving to me and her. On Friday, as soon as I finished work, I rushed home. My plan was to spend the weekend at my cabin. Upon my arrival, I found Wendy in my driveway. She wanted to collect her sister's belongings and had a list of items that Kelly expected to be returned. Almost all of the items were already packed in a box or stored in my garage waiting to be picked up. I made it clear to her that I wouldn't be responsible for any accusations of damage to Kelly's belongings. Instead, I offered to pay for a moving company to come pack and transport all her things. This was due to the fact that I was heading to my cabin and didn't have time to deal with Kelly's issues. Wendy agreed and hoped that I would have a good time. She took a box of Kelly's clothes and placed them in her car before leaving. She asked if she could join me on my trip to the cabin, to which I happily agreed. The weekend at the cabin went really well. The last time I was there, I realized what a treasure that place was with its beautiful views and complete seclusion. It offered a tranquil retreat where one could truly relax. On Monday, I called a moving company, and by Tuesday, 3 men with a large truck came and started loading Kelly's belongings. I meticulously recorded and took photos of each item as they were being packed and loaded. I thanked the movers for their patience and tipped each of them an extra $50. I sent all the photos and recordings to my lawyer and continued with my day. The house feels empty but clean without all of Kelly's stuff. My lawyer had advised me not to discard anything that could be considered shared property, so I moved most of the furniture to a storage unit. I've been sleeping in the guest room since she left, and only now have I started buying new furniture. Most of it will likely stay in the garage now that I have the space. Despite everything, I don't plan on keeping the house, even if I win it in the divorce, as it holds too many painful memories. A few days after the movers transported Kelly's things, my lawyer received some paperwork. Apparently, I had somehow damaged her belongings, and she was demanding I pay her $1,500, threatening to take me to court otherwise. My lawyer, undeterred, promptly sent her lawyer all the videos and pictures, asking where these so-called damages were. According to him, this situation just further shows her instability to the judge, and while it may be a headache now, it will serve as excellent evidence in court. It appears her lawyer wasn't quite prepared for the level of meticulousness I possess. I mean, I've photographed and documented everything. When I discovered my wife's affair, for some reason, I found myself drawn to this page. I read the horror stories about what some people's former spouses did to them, and I adamantly refused to let myself be another statistic. I've braced myself for just about every accusation she could throw at me. At this point, there's little she could do that would surprise me. Kelly has been calling me roughly every other day, but like a man avoiding a telemarketer, I never pick up. If she leaves a voicemail, I don't even bother listening to it. Instead, I just forward it straight to my lawyer. Every time I send something to my lawyer, he chuckles and tells me, "You are a lawyer's dream. You heed every piece of advice, and you've compiled a mountain of evidence all on your own." I have yet to encounter a client who has performed so exceptionally well. It's no exaggeration when I say he repeats this every time, but it always brings a grin to my face. Having that reassurance that I'm doing everything right certainly makes this crazy situation a little more bearable. Roughly 2 or 3 weeks ago, my lawyer informed me that we had enough evidence to bury her outside of court. If our attempt fails, at least it would reflect favorably on us for trying. We scheduled a date to meet in a neutral lawyer's office. He advised me not to react to anything Kelly might say, reminding me that everything would be recorded for a judge to read if it goes to court. We arrived early, and to my surprise, she was already there, waiting with her lawyer. It was like a scene from a courtroom drama. The lawyers began their polite exchange while Kelly and I sat in silence, the tension palpable. Kelly's lawyer broke the ice inquiring about our offer. My lawyer, with a scoff that could rival a sitcom character, responded, "Given the mountain of evidence detailing Kelly's infidelity and inappropriate behavior, the only offer we'll make is half of the selling price of the house and half of the savings account. That's more than any judge would award you. Essentially, you'll walk away with what you came into the marriage with." Kelly began to cry, asking if there was anything she could do to fix things. I replied, "You've been cheating on me since before our wedding. There's nothing you could do to make me forget or forgive what you've done. Sign the papers. It's more than you deserve, and I want to be done with this whole sham you created." She excused herself to the restroom, presumably to compose herself. Upon returning, still teary-eyed, she signed the papers and left soon after. In about a month, everything will be filed, and all I'll need to do is sell the house. The house, which was once my home.